Welcome, good thinkers. Welcome to Good Thinking Live. This is our little bit of time each Monday to steal away from all the time that we are told to focus on what to think so we can give ourselves a little bit of time for improving how we think. So welcome to the weekly show. Let us know who you are and where you're from. Just a little housekeeping. We are streaming from LinkedIn Live and from YouTube Live on my channel, Becky Saltzman. So if you want to subscribe, you can hit that. You can subscribe and then hit that bell for notifications, or you can tune in to LinkedIn Live. And we're here Monday mornings on the West Coast time, Pacific time, and at 9 o'clock and 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time everywhere else. So let us know who you are and where you're from. A lot of participation. And here is the first thing to think about. All right, think about something that you predicted. Something that you predicted that you got totally right. Now, there might have been some things, well, exactly, but maybe you weren't that specific in your prediction. So if you were kind of loose in your prediction, something you predicted that you got totally right. Maybe that a particular politician would win or lose, or a business would succeed or fail, or that a project would get completed on time. All right. Get that in your mind. Everyone have it in your mind? Who's here? Let us know. Do you have something in your mind? Yes or no? All right. Now, think of something that you predicted and you were wrong. No excuses, no justification, just an acknowledgement that what you predicted didn't happen. Like maybe the time was off. So that would be, well, I predicted it would happen, but the time was off. Okay, that's a justification. You didn't predict. Or maybe you predicted that the level was different, or that the result or outcome was different than you think. All right. So if you have that in your mind, here's the question. When you make a prediction or forecast that goes wrong, how many of you have thought or tend to think, like as a habit, I would have been right if it hadn't been for X? Or this would have happened as planned if it hadn't been for X. And that X might be, maybe you just think about it like that. Maybe you think about it as a counterfactual. What if X hadn't happened? Well, I wouldn't have broken my leg if I hadn't gone skydiving. But I wouldn't have gone skydiving if my friend hadn't invited me. And I wouldn't have gone skydiving if I hadn't been traveling to this particular place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you know that counterfactuals like that have a lot of variables. So does predicting. Predicting has a lot of variables. And today we're going to dive into what we know, the best of what we know about people who are better than the rest of us at forecasting, and maybe even some tips and tricks that we can think about to improve our predictions of the future. I mean, sometimes our predictions of the future, we want that exact accurate, but sometimes we want these prognosticators, these fortune tellers, these futurists to give us some ideas of things we hadn't thought about. Whether or not they happen is less relevant, but just so we can kind of brace ourselves or prepare ourselves. All right. So let us know who you are and where you're from. Stephen is here. Hi, Stephen. Greetings from the only place in the world with a nuclear reactor operated by college undergrads. Hopefully the only place. That's good. That's good trivia. That is good trivia. Anyone want to take a guess where that is? All right. Again, let us know who you are and where you're from. We've got to participate. This is going to be great, short and sweet, but also I think some key takeaways. So many judgments involve forecasting, predicting the future. Maybe you judge a job candidate by forecasting how much you'll like working with them or how productive they'll be. Or maybe you're judging how long a project will take or how much a project will cost. It involves predicting the future, forecasting. So it turns out that we're not as good at forecasting as we think we are, like significantly not. But we can learn from the people, the small percentage of people, that's a little hint, small percentage of people who are. Hi, Vinay. Vinay, welcome. Vinay from India. Thank you. Regular good thinker. So glad to see you. Stephen says, in 1999, I predicted that Wi-Fi would eventually sell in the low hundreds of millions of units per year. In reality, billions of Wi-Fi chipsets are now sold per year. So that's interesting because in that case, you predicted the direction, but not the degree. So you got to get credit for one. And that's actually part of these super forecaster studies that we'll touch on. Hello, Swapnil. Welcome from India. Okay, SAP consultant from India. Welcome, welcome, good thinker. All right, so let's get into it because before we get started, I want to ask a couple of questions and then we're going to get right into the meat of things. Do you think that being a subject matter expert makes one a better forecaster, even within that subject? So let's say you are a subject matter expert on football or soccer. Do you think that that makes you a better forecaster when it comes to forecasting things about football or soccer? Yes or no? Yes or no? So you can say subject matter better, subject matter, nah, not so much. Doesn't matter. Now, we do bring our biases and overconfidence, which is also a bias, to forecasting, and those things make us not such great forecasters. All right. So some of the most interesting research in forecasting started in about 2011 with Professor Philip Tetlock and a team of researchers who then went on they founded the Good Judgment Project. So if you want to check out the Good Judgment Project, I encourage you to do that. They recruited tens of thousands of volunteers. And these weren't specialists or experts or in any way, futurists, but they were just ordinary people. And then they were asked to answer hundreds of questions like, will North Korea detonate a nuclear device before the end of the year? Questions like that, those kinds of geopolitical questions. And the project focused on these large questions about world events. And they used a lot of forecasts. And they also asked participants to make forecasts in terms of probabilities that an event would happen rather than like it will or it won't. So it wasn't just like, will North Korea detonate a nuclear bomb? It would or not. It would be in terms of the probabilities. All right. And they gave the forecasters, here's another thing. They gave the forecasters regular opportunities to update their forecasts in the face of new information. So the forecasters weren't told that they had to find evidence to justify their initial forecast, but that they could adjust their forecast in any way, tweak it, fine tune it, or completely rethink it based on new information. All right. How do you think these tens of thousands of forecasters did? How do you think they did? All right. So while you think to answer that, Stephen says, it seems like being an expert more likely to help with linear forecasts than with disruptive forecasts. As it turns out, neither, because linear forecasts and disruptive forecasts in terms of probabilities don't quite mean what we think they mean when we talk about them in business, but not so much actually. And so, okay, so Alan says, generally, yes, experience with subject matter provides a small modicum of insight. Not statistically. I mean, yes, a small modicum of insight, for sure, but not as it relates to forecasting, not correlated as highly as a lot of other things, a very tenuous correlation at best. All right, which was very surprising. All right, so results were that the overwhelming majority of forecasters did very poorly. Here's the next question. What percentage of the forecasters did well? What percentage of the forecasters did well? These forecasters were called super forecasters. So you might have heard the term super forecasters. It came out of this study. And this small percentage, so you can guess the percentage, I'll tell you it's small, they even did better than the average for the intelligence community analysts who were trained and here's the thing that's so super surprising, and who could read secret data and the intercepts. Like these super forecasters even did better than trained intelligence analysts with all the inside information. What percentage? Anyone want to take a stab at the percentage? Anyone? 2%. 2% of the people were super forecasters. And he found that a couple of things about the super forecasters. One, they absolutely had a higher general mental aptitude, higher IQ as indicated on intelligence tests, just standard general mental aptitude intelligence tests. Overall, on average, higher. Fine. But it wasn't just the sheer power of their intelligence, it was how they apply it. All right, so here is some of the things that came out of this study. What makes someone a super forecaster? Or rather, what did these super forecasters have in common? And then we'll get to what are some of the things that you can do, particularly when working with teams, and how to avoid some of the traps that lead people astray in prediction and in forecasting. All right, you ready? So the super forecasters, first of all, these individuals systematically get their information from a much wider range of sources. So where do you get your information? Anyone want to say? I think we've asked this before. We'll be curious to hear. Where do you get your information? Is it from a very narrow, or is it from a wide source? Are you just focusing on sports or entertainment, or maybe something very deep into the sciences? I think that a lot of scientists have moved the world forward in terms of breakthroughs, to Steven's point, disruptions. But the narrow focus, the experts, which have value for sure, but not super forecasters. So, there's good things that people, you can do this if you're that, if you can do this, the other, but the evidence of what makes a good super forecaster is that they do get their information from a wide range of sources. They also have high levels of curiosity, and they believe that it's fun, like it's worth forecasting. Give it a try. Instead of saying, I have no idea, like, how would I know that? They're kind of game to give forecasting a try, which means that they probably do just a lot of forecasting, like guessing the percentage, like we ask here, what percentage? It's like they would maybe weigh in. Maybe they would say the wrong number, more than 2% or less than 2%, but they would be game to weigh in on taking guesses, not so afraid if they're wrong. And turns out in that way, where you can practice and practice and practice on little things in a wide range of subjects, it is a skill that can be cultivated, which is pretty cool. All right. They also tend to think more probabilistically. They're not mathematicians necessarily, but they thought more probabilistically and less kind of intuitively. So they looked at probabilities, and we'll talk about some of the questions that most of us ask, and then the questions that super forecasters ask, just kind of as default. And that helps recalibrate. I know it helped recalibrate me in terms of looking at some things from new angles. So they also adjust their forecast, even a little by a little, to get more specific, even if they are adjusting their forecast in a direction that might make other people feel protective, like maybe I don't want to even think about that. I don't want to be wrong in front of people. And they tend to work in teams to benefit from others' opinions, and particularly more divergent opinions. So that's the other thing. They tend to expose themselves. A lot of these, I only want to be with like-minded people. That's fine. And there's, a lot of comfort in that. Doesn't necessarily make you a super forecaster. They keep score of their predictions, so they don't totally become true by justification. So they'll write down their predictions, because our memories are constructs. And so I often think, I knew that. And if I had to go back and look at exactly a transcript of what I said or what I thought or at the time, it might not look quite as accurate as I think. So, keeping track of your predictions and adjusting your predictions, and not just erasing your initial prediction, but adding on to your prediction as new information becomes available, can really help with your ability to see the future. They also admit that they're wrong, and they're not afraid of admitting that they're wrong and learning from their mistakes. And that's much easier said than done. Okay. How often, or when was the last time? Because if I say how often, what are you going to say? Every day? When was the last time that you admitted that you were wrong without justification? Like, I may admit that I'm wrong, but I justify. Well, blah, 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 blah. But I'd probably do a lot of justification. Wow. When was the last time you admitted that you were wrong without justification? All right. Next question. How important is your confidence that your forecast is correct? Like if you kind of not confident in the forecast, you kind of put it out there and you think, yeah, I'm not so sure that this is going to happen versus I am really confident that this is going to happen. How much do you think that your confidence correlates with your forecast accuracy? Not that much? Medium? A lot. Like you would think intuitively that if you're sure about your forecast, that has to be correlated with a higher level of accuracy. Drum roll, please. Not so much. All right. The confidence judgment accuracy is at best a weak positive correlation. Super forecasters do perceive a larger range of possibilities. So they're system thinkers in that they perceive impacts that others miss. So they think, okay, it's not just this or this, that it kind of is spelled out on maybe one side of thinking or another side of thinking, but and it's not a mix of the two of meeting in the middle. Sometimes it's completely outlier thinking, something that binary or polar thinking makes difficult are these nuanced thinking. All right, we've got some people. I've got to say hi to some people. Hello, Thani. Welcome. Ellen. Let's see. I've got new comments. Let's see if I can get everyone. Patrick says, I'm always wrong. Me too. I hate it. Alan says, perhaps being uncomfortable in an intellectual state, always pushing oneself, expands thinking and thus forecasting skills. Yeah, it's really true. And even, I think, putting yourself in situations that might in the past have been uncomfortable, but now you're totally comfortable. You're like, I'm always wrong, like Patrick says. Stephen says, I'm guessing a low correlation between confidence and accuracy. And you're guessing right. Rubber chickens. A lot of the most confident people are the least insightful and self-aware. I'm not even sure that how much self-awareness and insights can be ideas. It's super hard to put the correlation because forecasting is a very specific thing that definitely overlaps with insight and self-awareness, but I don't know how much. That's what I don't know. Hi, FF. Yay, welcome, FF. And Lida, welcome from Spain. Love Spain. Can't wait to get back. Lanzarote. I've never been. Where is Lanzarote? All right, I'm sure I'm botching that pronunciation, but welcome from Spain. Let me know where that is. I'm curious what part of Spain. All right, let's get into it because one of the other things is that super forecasters employ an outside view. And an outside view, we talked about an outside view. I can't remember. I think we talked about an outside view in my LinkedIn Learning course, Improving Your Judgment for Better Decision Making. We actually touched on some of Philip Tetlock's work about hedgehogs and foxes, basically subject matter experts and kind of promiscuous information lovers. Like, I like to learn a lot about a little versus I like to go deep into one subject. And it's totally fine. Going deep into one subject leads to all kinds of scientific breakthroughs. Not as highly correlated, as I mentioned, with forecasting. All right, let's talk about an inside and outside view. Because an inside view, Canary Islands. Okay. Canary Island. So cool. An inside view on a topic is kind of is mostly islands. Yeah, is mostly what we do, which is we make predictions based on our understanding of the details of the process. So we gather all the information and we kind of project from the inside out. Okay, well, if this is going to take this long, this is going to take this long, this is going to take this long. This project might take this long, or if this is going to cost this much, or we gather information from the engineers tell us this is going to cost this, the marketing team tells us it's going to cost this much, and we just add up all that, and that becomes the budget. That's the most common way we even internally make predictions, and certainly the most common way we make predictions in the workforce because it's the easiest way, even when it's hard. The outside view is different because this involves ignoring all of those details. It doesn't matter what the marketing team says it's going to cost or how long it's going to take, not initially anyway. And instead outside view uses an estimate based on a class of roughly similar previous cases. And these are called reference class forecasting or base rate forecasting. And it seems pretty technical, but one of the things that gets in the way of us doing it is when we are working on a project, we think this project is unique. Like, we think that there has never been in the history of the world a project similar to what we're doing that we could use a rough base rate from which to start. And so finding that base rate goes against our feeling that what we're doing is unique and what we're doing is different and it doesn't count. Hiring mistake is, taking an inside view. So like reading a resume or CV, interviewing, reviewing answers. An outside view is asking how many people are successful in this role. That's a totally different question. Not a question necessarily as a recruiter that you would start with. You would look at all the criteria that you need for this role. You match it to their CV or a resume. You would interview the people, but maybe the first thing to switch from an inside to outside would just be a statistical question. That's more of a probabilistic question. How many people are successful in this role? So one of Tetlock's findings and his team from the Good Judgment Project has been that cognitive and personality traits were actually more important than specialized knowledge when it came to predicting the outcome of various world events. So it has to do with mental agility more than it has to do with memorizing facts. In particular, a 2015 study found that the key predictors of forecasting accuracy, number one, cognitive ability, political knowledge, and number three, kind of seems mushy, but super important, and probably without this, the others don't matter, open-mindedness. Super forecasters were better at inductive reasoning, pattern detection, cognitive flexibility, and again, open-mindedness. And they scored higher on both intelligence and political knowledge. And these kinds, just kind of a general knowledge and a willingness to explore all kinds of things. So I think we've got that thing. Think of the last wedding you attended. Let's say someone asked you, like, maybe not a very cool question, but like you're at this wedding and someone says to you, what's the likelihood of this couple getting divorced? Now, once you get over the tackiness of that question being asked at a wedding, let's look at it as a super forecaster. Aside from being distasteful, what would you say or what would you use to make this prediction? Would you look at the stars in their eyes, how much they love each other, how much they seem to have in common? What would you use to make this prediction? Put it in the chat. And then we're going to get into what you can do to improve your forecasting. We kind of addressed it with yourself, but also if you're working with teams. What would you do? What information would you consider? A super forecaster might ask this divorce question by looking at something like demographics of the couple, and then they might look at a base rate for divorce within that demographic. Not a very romantic answer, but from a forecasting perspective, more highly positively correlated with accuracy. Jennifer says their first dance song, totally like how much they looked into each other's eyes. Now, here's the deal. Wouldn't it be interesting to take all of the first dance songs from thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of weddings and see if that correlated in some way? Now, that is a great, I know you're joking, but it's actually a really good point, because this is where algorithms, AI, is going to come in terms of how it's able to process and make forecasts. Thus far, the combination of kind of AI is better in some forecasting and not in others. It's not there yet, but at some point you could feed it with all kinds of information, and all kinds of correlations could come out of the data, including how you use the first dance song to predict whether a couple is going to get divorced. All right, Lita says statistical experience and intuition. Turns out that statistical experience, yes, but intuition, not so much, because intuition, as we've talked about before, is really, it feels good and it kind of gives you an ideas and it's fun, but it's not statistically as highly correlated with accurate predictions. Maybe predictions like, it's probably going to happen. See, I said it was probably going to happen. That's not really a prediction that you can measure, because if it didn't happen, you could say, well, I didn't say for sure, I said probably. And if it did happen, you could say, well, my intuition was that it was probably going to happen. So that's why intuition is a mushy thing. And intuition is really better for very specific, regular, kind of contained events that have for which you have a lot of exposure and that you have immediate feedback. Okay. All right. Let's get into the few things to be aware of, and then we'll end with how you can bring teams together that can work in very specific ways and actionable ways that you can actually take to your team. And this is some of the work that we do. So we're stealing from Applied Curiosity's workshops to give you some good thinking tips, because that's the whole point, sharing. And then you spread it to other people, because we need to have people who give themselves some time for improving how to think. All right, number one, a few things to be aware of is overconfidence, because overconfidence prevents you from updating your beliefs. And as they learned in this big super forecaster experiment, constantly updating your beliefs, adding new information. I mean, again, if you want to be a super forecaster, this is how you do it. Or if you want to improve the accuracy of your predictions. Also, beware of question swapping. What is question swapping? Anyone want to take a guess? Aha. Anyone want to take a guess? All right. Question swapping is, let's say your question is, do I have cancer? Scary question. Now, here's something where you might ask yourself instead, does this doctor look like the type of person who would know that I have cancer? That's a very different question. Now, you would say, well, how can I predict that I have cancer? Well, a super forecaster would be able to, as you become a super forecaster, you're going to be able to apply all kinds of insights from all kinds of areas. And you might even be able to ask the question, does this doctor look like the type of person who would know I have cancer? And you might be able to improve upon that question to get the right doctor on your team. But these simple swaps, these are mental swaps that we do, question swapping all the time, where we say, I want to hire this person because I think they're going to be great on the job. So instead we ask the question, do I like this person? Like an affect heuristic bias. So these are kinds of the question swapping, is to get really to the heart of the question that you're trying to ask. And then the next thing to look out for, these are the three top biases: the overconfidence, the question swapping, and the hindsight. So question swapping might be affect heuristic. The last bias to look out for, there's many, but these are the top three, is the hindsight bias, because that prompts us to believe that we knew it all along. And it's super difficult. You see other people doing it where you're like, you did not know that, but we do it ourselves. I catch myself, because I don't write down my predictions. It's easier to do. So if I want to become a super forecaster, I'm going to commit to writing down my predictions about different kinds of things and then updating and seeing what I thought. But the hindsight bias can block us from acknowledging, even to ourselves, that our predictions were wrong. And this keeps us from seeing the role of luck. Huge role. Whatever. Luck is all the stuff that we can't put our finger on. All right. So what do we do with the team? We're going to go quickly. We only have a few minutes. Number one, ask team members at all levels of involvement to specify what is your confidence in your prediction. So when you are getting a team together to make a prediction, make sure that you're getting a diverse team in terms of experience, cognitive abilities, levels in the organization. Authority bias can be very it can be messy and can screw up your predictions, because you all defer to the person who is your boss's boss's boss. And that person, as you have now know, as an expert, does not make them a better predictor. Could make them a great innovator, could make them a great manager, could make them a great leader, could make them a great disruptor, but it doesn't. We're not talking about those things. We're talking about prediction forecasting. And that's a very different skill. All right. So for example, what's your confidence that our product will launch on a certain date, or that our project will be completed? Not our project will be completed in May, but what is your confidence? Well, I'm pretty confident. No, what is your confidence? Put a number on it. Aha, put a number on it. Quantifying confidence helps you with probabilistic thinking. All right. Also, if your prediction doesn't happen, indicate what will be the most likely reason. So this is kind of pre-mortem. So imagine your project has failed and failed to maybe make the date or failed to make the budget, and then think through all the possible reasons that your project has failed, even though you haven't even launched your project yet. So this is a pre-mortem. And create a prediction market. This is number 3. Create a prediction market where you all bet on the likely outcome offered by an independent team. So you get a team of people together all over. You say, okay, all over your organization, or if you're a small organization, you say, okay, what are your predictions of this happening in, or when do you think it's going to happen? Okay, I think it's going to happen in May. Or how much do you think it's going to cost? I think it's going to cost $20 million. And then you have them put their confidence on that. But they're independent. They're not doing it as a group. Independence is a very important thing, because once we get together in our judgments, then we have the cascading bias where my opinion affects your opinion, which affects this opinion, which affects that opinion, or projection. So independence is super important in forecasting. So this prediction market, then you all get together and you bet on the likely outcomes offered by these independent teams. And you don't know if you're betting this a low probability on your boss or on your administrative assistant. You don't know, because they're independent and they're anonymous. And then you kind of put the likelihoods, the probability. That's creating a prediction market. And it's kind of a fun thing to do. It seems like it's very involved, but to the extent that your predictions matter financially significantly, these are good things to do. And these are decision hygienic things to do. Avoid rooting for an outcome and allowing that to influence your predictions. So predicting that what we want to happen has a higher likelihood of happening is not a good forecasting technique. Forecasters tended to do this in the experiments much less than the rest of us. Aha. So Jennifer says, this is fantastic and will be used with my new team. I think Jennifer has an announcement. All right. So then we have 3 more. We're going to go quickly. We're a little over time, but we're going to go 3 more. Acknowledge what you don't know and acknowledge what is not knowable. Some things are just not knowable. Oops, lost my ear thing. Some things are not knowable. And it's good to separate what you don't know from what is not knowable, just kind of as a again, more decision hygiene. Aggressively acknowledge that there's a difference between what you know and what you don't know and what's not knowable. Then aggregate multiple independent estimates to arrive at a better forecast. Averaging actually reduces noise. We're going to be talking a lot about noise as we launch some new exciting things at Applied Curiosity Lab, in our workshops, and in our consulting. So that's pretty cool. Aggregating knowledge and then averaging. And then finally, go even deeper by tracking the successful forecasts and averaging the estimates from just the most successful, averaging the most successful and the most unsuccessful forecasts, and kind of looking at those, tracking those, averaging those to get closer to your ability, your true ability, or your team's ability to forecast. So just kind of these independent judgment, this understanding of awareness of biases, tracking. If you want to keep track, we have the decision notebook is free at Applied Curiosity Lab. Just go to the offerings and you can download a free decision journal, not journal, notebook, whatever. And then you can use that to track not only your forecast, but some of the data and things you were thinking at the time in making those decisions. And there's a couple of bonuses. And if you want a bonus called the Delphi method, let me know in the chat. And I'll make sure that you get a little bonus of the Delphi method just for you. So remember that everything is connected and nuance matters. And if you want to keep track of your decisions, it's a very good way of calling yourself out so that you don't get lazy and say, yeah, I kind of thought that, or probably this, getting more probabilistic, getting more specific, getting more math, and then allowing yourself to update with more information and not be worried about whether you're a flip-flopper, because instead you are what? A good thinker. So thank you for being here. See you next week. We're here Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, on LinkedIn Live and at YouTube at Becky Saltzman. Join. We need good thinkers from all over the world, and I love your feedback today. Thanks. Have a great week.